So I'd like to welcome everyone to today's MGAA market briefing. Pleased to have AXA with us today, and I'll just do, as usual, a short bit of housekeeping, and then I'll introduce our presenters and our session. So really for the benefit of anyone who's not had the misfortune to hear my housekeeping before, just a few do's and don'ts. So start with the don'ts, as I always do. If you could please keep cameras and microphones off, because it does help us with the technology. And yeah, I think my favourite phrase in these sessions is we really do want to stay with you to the end. So to greatly appreciate that if cameras and microphones are off. Also, I don't think there are any, but if anyone is going to start any AI note-taking tools, if you could please refrain from doing so, because we don't have everyone's permission, so unfortunately that's not an option for this session. So now the do's. Please do ask our presenters questions. They're keen and eager to answer all your questions. So please pop those into the chat, and we'll cover them off at the end of the session. I know that Zoom does let you know, I believe, at quite some volume when you enter the call, but yeah, just a reminder that the session is being recorded. But the good news about that is that will be a recording available, which I'll share with you by early next week. So if you want to review any content or give a colleague a nudge to have a look at the content, feel free to do so. My very last updates, a bit of information to share, is just to remind you that our sessions are accredited by the CII. So if this meets with your development needs, you can include it in your learning log. So that's my bit over and done with. I'm so happy to have AXA with us today. So we have James, Morven and Heather, who will do far better introductions to themselves than I will do. So I will hand over to James, who's going to introduce their session, which is Insights and Leadership Strategies to Encourage Next-Gen Workforce. So over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Alison, and a warm welcome to everyone on this sunny but rather cold day. Nice to see so many of you joining for what is going to be a really interesting session. So thank you all for taking the time out of your day. It's really important that we do take this time and pick up some extra additional insights from the market. So thank you very much. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James Bishop. I am a Senior Schemes Development Manager for Delegates Authority and Partnerships within AXA. So I manage a team of relationship managers across the 250 odd DAs, MGAs, schemes that we currently look after. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you guys and the MGA community, which we're so passionate about ourselves. I'm fortunate that I'm joined with two brilliant presenters in Morven Cameron and Heather McCall. Heather is our head of future skills, and Morven is our future skills consultant here at AXA. I'll let them do a bit more of an intro when I pass over. But as the session states, this is going to be about insights and leadership strategies to engage the next gen workforce. So we'll take a bit of a deep dive into the evolving workforce landscape for a mixture of thought leadership, research, a bit of context, and probably some examples from what we've learned in AXA so far. I think it's going to be a really fascinating topic. I find it highly fascinating, and one which will affect the industry quite heavily and all of us in a similar vein to the pace which we're seeing the market changes and the technological advancements, etc. So the next generation, they are the future of our industry. So how do we prepare ourselves? How do we ready ourselves to attract and indeed retain talent for generations to come, which is the question on my lips. We do have Q&A towards the end, so if you want to pop some questions in the Q&A, do so, and we'll get to those at the end. We're also using Slido for a bit of audience participation on polls, etc. So you'll see some QR codes pop up, so if you want to just get out your phone and take a snap of those, it will help with engagement. But that's it from me. Great to see so many people on the call, and I'll now pass over to Heather.
Thank you, James, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining. Hopefully we're not interrupting your lunch break. So as James has said, my role is Head of Future Skills for the AXA Commercial business. I have been with AXA for 12 years now, and the majority of my career has been within a generalist HR environment. although I'm deeply passionate about learning and the capability agenda. Most recently, my role involves managing the underwriting capability team and really understanding how we can enhance capability and in that underwriting space, and also looking at how that interchanges with claims, particularly as we think about transformation and technology changes coming down the line. We've also started to look at future skills. What are future skills? Well, it's a huge topic. But actually where we've started is predominantly in the early career space. And I'm not going to speak for Morven, but that's where she's focused her efforts since joining the business. We've had some great early successes in that early career space, but actually what I'm really keen to do is understand where we can think about future skills beyond that early careers landscape. So where is it we can help our existing employees and our future employees with things like returnships, hire, train, deploy models, etc. There's lots of opportunities for us to discover in that future skill space. So I'm keen to get out of early careers and into some of that as we get into 2026. I'm more than happy to engage in any discussions in that with any of you after this presentation. I'll now hand over to Morven for her intro.
Well, thank you very much, Heather. Hello, everyone. It's really nice to join you all today for this session on the next gen workforce. As Heather said and James mentioned, I am the Future Skills Consultant at AXA Commercial, and the majority of my role focuses on our early careers program delivery. So I do spend a lot of my time working with the newest generation entering our workforce. Today I'm looking forward to sharing some of our learnings and insights from AXA Commercial, the things that have worked for us, maybe some of the things that haven't worked for us as we navigate bringing the next generation into our organisation, and hopefully give you some inspiration and ideas if that's something that you're working on as well. So later on in my part of the session, I thought we would be ambitious and introduce some interactivity, as James mentioned. So don't worry, nothing too laborious, just a few Slido polls to help me get a bit of a read of the room. To get involved in that, if we can just pop on to the next slide so everybody can start to get logged on to Slido. All you need to do is scan that QR code and put in the code potentially, and that'll get you access to the live polls as we move through the session. There won't be any polls up there yet, so just get yourself logged in so that you are ready. Okay, Heather, I will pass back to you to take us through the first part of today's session.
Thanks, Morven. And just having a look at the learning objectives, as Alison has already mentioned, these are CII accredited sessions, really important from a CPD perspective, which is close to all of our hearts. So I'll just, I'm not going to read these verbatim, but I think just to give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today, to set the right context, I'm going to kick off with some thoughts on the external landscape, how workplaces are changing and the responses from leading organisations, society and historical factors that are shaping workforce expectations, and what AI and automation might mean for the roles that you have within your business. I'll also share some thinking on future skills that will be needed in our industry, and then hand over to Morven to spotlight Gen Z, what the research tells us, what we know from working with Gen Z colleagues, and how you might be able to support them as they enter your workforce. As we walk through the presentation, we want you to start to consider what this means from a personal perspective when navigating an evolving workplace, coupled with the increasing presence of AI and automation. We know that it's likely that those of you who have joined will be at various stages in your careers and leadership journey, and hope that by opening up this conversation, we can help you to feel confident to embrace the opportunities that a multi-generational workforce will bring. So if we can just move on, please, Alison, to the pink slide, which talks about the external landscape. We know that the world of work is changing. How work is done and what skills are needed is a key consideration to ensure future-proofing our most precious asset, our workforce. We're seeing more digital and automated solutions, driving the need for greater agility. Everything is instant. Think about service delivery models. You order from Amazon today, may even get your parcel before you go to bed. And then, if there's an issue, your product is incorrect or damaged, you might not even have to send it back, but get a refund anyway. We need to adapt to these new practices and respond with greater agility, regardless of the industry that we work within. Post-COVID, we've definitely seen an increase in flexible and remote working. There are many positives with this as we tap into geographies that we might never have considered before. And collaboration now doesn't need everybody to be in the same room, even in the same time zone. We have technology that allows us to communicate. We have virtual whiteboards to allow idea generation and prioritisation, and tools that can produce meeting transcripts at the touch of a button. But there are also challenges to consider, tax and legal implications with a more fluid and flexible workforce. Where does the responsibility lie for determining whether a role is inside or outside of IR35? How do we demonstrate inclusivity for those who are not working in standard working patterns and standard ways? A critical one for me here, as I would say, being a HR professional, is employee expectations. I think this is partly driven by the generational shift, and we'll talk more about this throughout our presentation. Individuals want greater control over their careers, and they want different careers. You know, things like YouTubers, influencers, those are all new careers that we never even thought about probably 5 years ago. And some of the flexibility gained during the pandemic has made people think differently. What's important to them, and that ever important work-life balance. We see more non-standard working patterns than ever before, compressed hours, 9-day fortnights, requests to switch bank holidays. Those are naming just a few. It'd be interesting to hear how much of this you're seeing in your workplace and where you might be struggling to be supportive or embracing those requests for flexibility. Really big question, are we productive enough? A question that our CEO asks constantly, and one that should be front and centre as we strive for more customer centricity and optimise the utilisation of skills. This obviously interacts with hybrid working. Can we measure work from home in the same way that we can working from an office? And if so, does this drive a culture of attendance rather than productivity? Because actually it's outputs that are important. And finally, culture and mindset. Are we diverse and representing the communities that we serve? We know that inclusion and belonging is hugely important, and the younger generation in particular strive for that sense of purpose. But can we truly say that our workforce represents our customer base? And is this evidenced all the way through the organisation? We know that more diverse teams are more effective, so experimenting with different ways of working, such as agile and product-led teams, are becoming more common in organisations that do not naturally default to these ways of working. Thinking through the lens of skills might help to facilitate how we can make this happen. So we can move on, please, Alison. Skills-based organisations. You may or may not have heard of a skills-based organisation, and without blinding you with science, this is just new terminology for unleashing the full potential of a workforce. Skills-based organisations value individuals based on their unique set of skills, competencies and potential, enabling them to deliver high-quality work and drive business success. By shifting the emphasis from job titles to skills, organisations foster a culture of flexibility, agility and innovation. Current thinking by the likes of Deloitte, Gartner, Cranfield is that skills hubs need to be front and centre to drive a shared approach. We need to use common language. We need to use common frameworks, toolkits, measures of success, which in turn will then result in significant outcomes for both employees and the business as a whole. Some of these outcomes might include driving innovation by tapping into diverse skill sets, cultivating continuous learning by prioritising enhancement of capabilities through training programmes, through workshops, through mentoring, for example. Enabling agility and adaptability, meaning that you can adapt to evolving market demands, take on new projects, and quickly respond to emerging opportunities. Enhance employee engagement and retention, as your employees will feel valued for their skills and have the opportunity to grow. I've included on the slide here some of the drivers for organisations when considering whether a skills-based strategy is right for them. There are some interesting topics for consideration, and certainly all of those resonate with us at AXA. The areas that feel most relevant to me right now, the need for agility and increased focus on equity, with constantly responding to strategic needs and internal and external factors. Navigating change and transformation activities for ourselves and with our teams, and the environmental, social and governance agenda, which continues to ramp up. Alongside these things, we need to be really good at doing the basics to ensure that cost, performance pressures, for example, are well within our control. We can move on, please, Alison. Tomorrow's workforce change yesterday, really big claim by the Work Economic Forum. But if you think about it, you can't argue anything different. The pace of change is quicker than ever before, and that contributes to evolving workforce expectations. If you add in wider geopolitical disruption and economic instability we're currently experiencing, this poses some real challenges. I think everybody's holding out for the budget tomorrow because there's going to be quite a lot of impacts if you think about these key things that really influence the way that the workforce is responding. Research also tells us that the workforce in advanced countries is contracting fast. In Europe, the workforce is projected to be 25% smaller in 2 decades' time, while in the US, Generation Z has 3 million fewer people than millennials. Generation Alpha is expected to be smaller still. Pretty scary. For the first time in history, there are 5 generations working together. Morven and I were debating this yesterday. Is it 4, is it 5? But actually we worked out it probably could be. And that's for the first time ever. Gen Z in particular is driving innovation and will be critical to realising the full potential of tech-enabled transformation. However, each generation brings a unique set of experiences to the workplace, and future-ready businesses must support all of these viewpoints by promoting collaboration, upskilling, and people-centred change. Generally, workforce age demographics lean mostly towards young adults and middle-aged workers, so that's people born between 1981 and 1996. However, the insurance industry bucks this trend. And we know that within AXA, almost half of the colleagues in our business undertaking core insurance roles are over the age of 45. Leading an engaged, innovative and resilient workforce today means knowing who they are, what they need and how they work together. The focus should be on the threads that unite different generations and its benefits, intentionally creating multi-generational teams, breaking down hierarchies, letting go of biased generational stereotypes, and supporting through more emphasis on D&I. Age-inclusive policies and appropriate upskilling will help to mitigate generational divides and build and bridge knowledge gaps. So does this mean the robots are coming? The world is quickly becoming more automated, and there are many theories related to how our lives will be impacted by technology. If we look at the images here, we can see robo-dogs, autonomous vehicles, home delivery services, not a human in sight. On one hand, this seems really cool, but also presents a number of questions. What can go wrong? How can mistakes be rectified? Where is my personalised service? And most importantly for all of us, who would ensure this? I presented to a group of people leaders in AXA a couple of months ago and asked them to start thinking about how their roles and the roles undertaken by their teams might evolve over time, as technology helps to change our ways of working and become more effective and efficient. The response I received was most of this is really exciting, but actually some of this can be scary. If you've used the same underwriting system for 35 years, if you've got people in your teams that keep manual spreadsheets, if you don't trust what the data is telling you because you just have to go and check out the answer for yourself, I get it. The scale and pace of change aided by technology that we're seeing is bigger than ever before. However, as much as there is a view that we'll have to manage a hybrid workforce in the future, and by this I mean part human, part machine, the robots won't be taking over the world. And most research out there is indicating that AI will augment and not replace. What this actually means is that there's an opportunity to double down on the human-centric elements of roles and consider how those will interact with the opportunities that technology brings, which should result in more space for critical thinking and more fulfilling roles in the future. I'll give you a couple of examples from an HR perspective. Hiring processes. We can use AI to streamline and drive consistency in candidate journeys, but the ultimate decision before making a job offer will be made by a human. Team collaboration. AI can help with transcription, summarising meeting notes and scheduling, yet human-centric communication, creativity and relationship building during meetings remain essential. Performance reviews. AI can analyse performance metrics and suggest areas for improvement. However, conversations around personal growth, feedback and motivation are still led by managers. Hopefully putting some context around this is helpful, and I think the key message here is that humans and technology can coexist. We know that TV didn't replace the radio and the internet didn't replace books, And there will be many more examples of this as our world continues to develop. I'd ask you to think about how things that you see day in and day out can stimulate your thinking and how we might be able to adapt the way that we work in the future. And what does all of this mean from a future skills perspective? There is lots of thinking related to future skills, and I wanted to share with you some insights from the Financial Services Skills Commission. There are some important technical capabilities in here, and thinking in this space has certainly moved on as technology has progressed. Some of these may or may not be a surprise, and my call out here is that you shouldn't expect these skills to remain static, particularly in the more technical space, and the pace is continually ramping up and introducing more complexity. If I reflect on machine learning and AI, a couple of years ago, the conversations I was having internally related to our underwriters being aware of AI and automation. Now we're asking them to think about which tasks they undertake might be achieved through the use of AI. I think we'd expect to see most of these skills listed, not only as critical in our industry, but in all industries. And the key point I'd like to call out here relates to those human-centric skills. If you think about the makeup of your workforce currently, and indeed the skills that you use on a regular basis, almost half of the skills listed here are human-centric, non-technical. And regardless of your role, your status, or your stage of career, I'm sure you'd all agree that things like coaching, relationship management, creative thinking, teamwork, and adaptability are critical skills and have a big impact on how we operate as individuals and also leading our teams. So finally from me, we know that one of the key vehicles in driving future skills is understanding and embracing the new generation entering our workforce. I'm now going to hand over to Morven to share her thoughts with you on Gen Z, why focusing on this population is important, and how can we embrace and support them as a key part of our workforce.
Well, thanks very much, Heather. Yeah, it's a good place for me to pick up from. As Heather said, that the next generation are a really core tool in many ways for us to use to drive these future skills through our organisations. And so it is really important that we understand them, their needs, and how we get the best performance from them. But what does that actually look like in practice? So my take on it is that, especially within our industry at the moment, there are kind of two sides to this. The first, which the insurance industry has already kind of started to make quite good progress on, is that need to actually attract younger talent in the first place. And obviously we've heard lots, and you can see from some of the headlines here around the retirement cliff edge. It's being discussed quite a lot actually at the moment. There's been a flurry of activity and conversation around how we attract the next gen to work in insurance. How do we make it an attractive industry? And of course, yeah, we've still got quite a way to go in trying to solve that as a challenge. But it is great to see so many industry bodies and organisations coming together to tackle the challenge. And it's something that Heather and I are looped in on a daily basis almost at this point in terms of different people approaching us to try and collaboratively solve this challenge. But the other side of it, the second piece, I think, is to consider whether or not we are ready and our teams are supported to embrace the next generation of talent and ensure that they can actually thrive in our industry. And I know that sounds like, oh, we need to brace ourselves for their arrival, and I don't mean to make it sound so dramatic. And I'm not about to start talking about Gen Z in the way that we do sometimes hear people talking about them, as if they're almost an entirely different species and they have completely different wants and needs to every other generation. I actually feel that that's a dangerous trap for us to fall into, and you'll hear me emphasizing that at several points probably throughout the rest of the session. I think anyone that's worked with this generation can probably testify to the fact that there are some real incredible inherent skill sets that they're bringing to the table, and of course there are challenges as well. And it can be a little bit tempting sometimes to base management decisions on this generation on some of the quite heavily generalized characteristics we might see in kind of LinkedIn posts in the media, etc. But from my experience, that's really not an effective approach, and it's actually, you're going to lose out on a lot of the potential value you can extract from these individuals if you do treat them all the same way. And I say all of that because I guess it's part of my caveat. I'm not about to share a formulaic step-by-step guide for how we manage Gen Z at AXA, but rather I'm going to kind of walk that fine line between acknowledging that, yes, there are absolutely external factors that drive some common behaviours and habits amongst them all, but also acknowledging that at the core they are all individuals. So if we come on to the next slide, this is where I'm going to hopefully have activated our polling system. So I just want to get a read of the room really to understand how many of you are at the moment actually working with Gen Z colleagues. It would just be really helpful to get an understanding of how common that is. So hopefully you can scan the QR code. Yeah, I can see some voting coming through already, which is great. Fab. Okay, so at the moment coming through, we've got about 80% saying that they are working with Gen Z, about 20% saying no. A few fluctuations there. It's probably about what we would expect. Yeah. And obviously I've included that I'm not sure because it is difficult to tell sometimes what generation people are part of. But yeah, absolutely, that's where I thought we would be sitting. Okay, that's really, really helpful. So the other question I'm going to just activate now is just to get a little bit of an insight, if you're willing to share, those of you that have said, yes, you do work with this generation, is what your experience is. Any key challenges, any benefits, what kinds of things are coming through for you when you're working with them. Okay, a few coming through already. Expectation of more flexibility. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm really pleased to see that the lazy stereotype is wrong. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I'm a little bit biased given I work with them every day, but yeah. Yeah, they do expect flexibility, keen to prove themselves, wanting to learn, greater use of technology. Yeah, definitely something I can relate to. A few more coming through here. Yeah, we'll definitely touch on that flexibility piece. Yeah, lack of patience in relation to development and salary expectations. Different work-life balance, yeah. Heather alluded to that at the beginning. Enthusiastic and keen to learn more, better at making boundaries for capacity compared to how it was when I was junior, yeah. Okay, I'll leave that running just now, and it's just interesting to get your take on it, but that is definitely resonating with me on the whole, and definitely something that we have seen and experienced at AXA as well. So if we just move on, Alice, into the research slide for now, I just wanted to, whilst, I want to avoid generalizing of Gen Z here, I did want to look at some of the research because there is some good research out there that gives us an indication of the influence that they will have on the workforce, but also some of the common behaviours that might be impacted by the external factors and the environments that they are growing up in. So that first stat there gives you a sense of the scale of their influence on the workforce. And that's not just Gen Z, that's Gen Z and millennials. 75% of the workforce will be Gen Z and millennials by 2030. So that is coming quite quickly. The other two stats, I think, in my view, relate to the technology and communication tools that a lot of them have grown up with there. So obviously that 60% of Gen Z are saying they're more likely to stay at a company if their work is recognised publicly. And 74% said meaningful purpose tracking, progress tracking and short-term wins improve their engagement. So probably not hugely surprising for a lot of people that work with Gen Z. Obviously, there is a bit of a stereotype that a lot of them are on Snapchat and they are the TikTok generation. That's not necessarily all of them, but there is definitely a trend with this generation towards that need for those instant dopamine hits, that recognition, quick wins, and I'll discuss later some of that, even coming from some of their educational experiences, as well as obviously the shift in social interactions driven by social media, etc. However, I think probably if we're all honest with ourselves as well, when I look at this and I think about the decreasing attention spans and the need for instant results and information at our fingertips, I don't know if that's solely applicable just to Gen Z and millennials. It's possibly something that is increasingly impacting all of us, so that's definitely worth reflecting on as well. And one other piece that comes through in external research that's kind of linked to these stats that I've not actually cited on the slide here is the challenge that some of the next generation have in terms of navigating ambiguity. And this was a big topic of discussion at an event Heather was at this week, actually. The majority of them have grown up in a very different social environment to that of previous generations. And of course, they do find that navigating the ambiguity and uncertainty is a little bit more difficult. I don't know for certain, but it could be sensible to conclude that some of their desire for security, higher salaries, etc., comes from that fear of the future and navigating that uncertainty as well. So what the research that was feeding into that conversation that Heather was having at an industry event this week was kind of saying was that we really need to build or encourage them or coach them to build relationships that help them navigate that workplace ambiguity, because we know that as businesses continue to need to be really agile, that ambiguity isn't going anywhere. And another nice stat that came through from that was that 82% of us now have to work with other people to do our jobs, which might not be that surprising, I suppose, but what it does do is really emphasize and underline the importance of those social and emotional skills, which, as we've discussed, can be a little bit more challenging for this generation coming through just because of the environments that they've grown up in. So I would say from our experience of some of our early careers cohorts, a lot of them had real strengths in those social and emotional intelligence skills, but there were definitely some that struggled with that, and that really, I think, was reflecting what the research is getting at. But yeah, if we move on, Alison, to the next piece, I'm getting an error warning from my Zoom, but I assume everybody can still hear me okay. Yes, okay, fab, thanks, Heather. Cool. So just, yeah, moving on from the research, what do we actually know? What have we experienced at AXA, and how do we tackle some of these challenges and ready ourselves for the future? This part of the session comes with a few caveats. We're not Gen Z experts or psychologists or any of that. But what we wanted to share was just some of our own learnings from our own experiences, because we have found that we are now converting this talent into some really thriving employees that are adding a lot of value to our organisation. So we'll use a few case studies today from our recent early careers programmes, in particular our internship programme as well. So the first point here sounds obvious, but the irony is, like other generations before them, we do easily fall into that trap that I acknowledged before of assuming that the sweeping headlines and the research trends apply to all of them. Millennials were definitely burdened with that when they started moving into the workforce, and the same thing is happening with Gen Z. A lot of the research is useful, as we've seen. It does help us get an understanding of the factors that are influencing this generation. But actually the most important thing to remember when you engage with any young person entering the workforce today is that they are an individual, and treating them like that from the outset does tend to drive the best results. But what does that look like in practice, and what did we actually do to try and live that sort of ethos, I suppose? Well, one of the things that we did with our interns was we used personalised skills mapping and development. So whilst they were all on the same programme and they took part in the same activities and training, they all had their own personalised priority skills maps. So they would approach each of the activities that we had lined up with that kind of more personal development lens. So they were able to extract a lot more value from that experience. They knew exactly how they could use that activity and that experience to develop themselves in the key areas that they and their manager had identified. So actually they got so much more from the experience, and it was a lot more tailored to them, and their overall development was far accelerated. And at the end of the programme, it meant we also had some really measurable progress and stats around their individual progress on the key areas that they wanted to focus on. And what they told us at the end, and this is sort of a paraphrase but direct quote, was that they really valued the opportunity to develop as individuals, and they really appreciated and acknowledged that we hadn't taken a one-size-fits-all approach, which was really nice to hear. And I think anecdotally we heard from a lot of them that that was in contrast to the experience that some of their peers had had on other internship programs that weren't quite as tailored to them as individuals. So that's the first point. The second point, that piece around purpose and meaningful work, I don't actually think that's exclusive to Gen Z. I think every generation that has come before them has wanted to have meaningful work. But what is different about this generation, and you may have experienced it yourselves depending on the kind of conversations you're having and the types of individuals you have in your teams, but they do have a lot more access to information and data than any generation before them. So they're quite often well informed on a range of social, economic, environmental issues, or they're certainly very confident talking on those issues. And so they do care beyond the bottom line about what organisations are doing. And they're not scared to hold us to account on these things as well. So with our interns, we made a real effort to have those very open and authentic conversations from the outset, and being very clear on what happens when we get things right, but also really importantly, the consequences when we get things wrong. We were comfortable having those conversations when we needed to. And one thing I would say we've really, really learnt is that if you're not authentic, they see right through that. They are really, really comfortable having these kind of conversations. So you need to be very, very honest and prepared to, engage in that dialogue with them. One of the other things we did to really drive that sense of meaningful work and feeling like they were being valued was we actually gave them real business projects. So business projects that were maybe sitting on a shelf waiting to be executed by someone, but a team maybe didn't have the capacity to deliver it. They were given to the interns, so they knew that they were delivering valuable, meaningful work from day one, and the business got a lot of value from that. We made it very clear to them how the work they were delivering was adding to the wider organisational strategy, so that they were really, really clear on the bigger impact that the work they were doing was having. And I know that it can be quite daunting to think about giving someone who is brand new to the world of work that level of responsibility, and especially on something that has key deliverables against it. But it's really all about the support that you put in place for them. So we put in mentors and buddies who were trained and briefed to help ensure that those interns could deliver their projects and just bring that level of quality control as well. I suppose the elephant in the room is this technology and digital communication piece. We've discussed it a little bit already, but it probably is one of the first things that come to mind when you think about Gen Z. Despite some of the negative connotations about their technology usage, their digital literacy, as Heather mentioned before, is a key skill that we really need to nurture. When we give them the space to use their existing skills, with our interns, we definitely saw them be highly innovative. They were problem solving at a faster pace. In some cases, they were even upskilling the colleagues in their team on different software and different tools. And to them, actually, they didn't fully appreciate the value of the skills that they had in that regard. So I think the key learning for us there is if you do have a highly digitally literate young person in your team, definitely try to build their confidence, encourage them to share their skills, it's something that's so inherent to them that actually they don't need to learn it from scratch. So even if you introduce a new piece of technology or software, it's something that they can adapt to quite quickly. And they don't need a manual to try and work it out. They can actually quite instinctively navigate their way through it. Again, it's not the case for every single young person, but it's definitely a trend that we're seeing. So it's definitely worth exploring, given it's such an important skill for future-proofing our organisations. Another quick one, they don't always want to hear from senior leaders. Believe it or not, they're quite like hearing from people that are just a few years down the line from them. So someone that's maybe 4 years post-internship, who can give them a bit more of a true reality of the current industry and the career landscape in the industry. And actually managing their exposure to senior leaders is not a bad thing in terms of setting expectations, making clear what the escalation points are if they have a complaint or an issue. Not a problem that we've had at AXA, but I know from some of the other organisations I've worked with that there have been some kind of challenges with boundaries in terms of younger people in the organisation escalating things to a CEO level, etc. So it's definitely good to set those healthy boundaries from the outset. You can see in one of the pictures here, we've got our CEO, John Walker, on the middle level of the pictures there, being interviewed by a couple of our interns, which was fantastic, but it was a very kind of controlled environment. So they got that exposure to John, but we made sure they were very clear about his position in the business and what was an appropriate way for them to interact with him. Continual feedback is another one that you've probably heard a little bit about before with regards to this generation. I think it definitely is driven by the educational environment that they have come through. Similar to the next point on the list about setting clear goals and expectations, they both feed in together, those 2 points really, and I think it's something that they've been very used to in their education setting, where this generation have been examined, measured and tested way more than probably any other generation before them. So having those clear goals, expectations set, knowing what they're going to be measured against, knowing that the feedback they're getting is mapped to those goals and the follow through is really consistent as well. That is time consuming. I absolutely appreciate that. It requires a lot of attention, but what we've found is actually that the return on investment is immense. So when we see managers really investing time with our early careers individuals, especially in the first few weeks of them joining an organisation, they become so much more valuable and productive a lot more quickly. And I know that sounds really obvious, but it is something that we are actively always encouraging our managers to do, and we give them a bit of guidance on how to do that as well. So it's definitely worth considering and thinking about the environment that those young people are coming from in that education setting and supporting that transition into the world of work. And my final point on this slide sort of links into the first one. It's just get to know them. What are their aspirations? Where do they lack confidence? How do they learn? What gives them energy? All of those types of things. They are all different, and I think maybe a few examples from our experience. We did definitely have some interns who were more leaning into those Gen Z stereotypes in the sense that they preferred instant messaging as a form of communication. But we actually had a few that were very keen to pick up the phone and speak to you directly or grab a coffee with you. I even had some cases of people asking me during a session if they could have a printed copy of something to handwrite on it, because that was how they learnt. And so that probably bucks some of the stereotypes you might associate with Gen Z, but it just goes to show that they do all learn in different ways. They're just like everybody else, and they will have different approaches to things. So that is the main bits I wanted to cover on that slide. I think I've got another poll here for you, just to kind of get an understanding. I know some of you have already shared your kind of experiences with Gen Z, but I'd just love to understand what other traits, or from the kind of common list that's cited in a lot of the research in terms of traits associated Gen Z, which ones you are really seeing coming through? I think we had a lot of chat on flexibility and work-life balance already, so I anticipate that one might be a common one. But be interested to see if there are any others coming through. Yeah, transparency and authenticity, definitely one that I have seen a lot. Yeah, feedback coming through there as well. Goal setting and expectation setting. Yeah. Okay, great. Again, that's roughly where I thought we would be. Interested to see not too much coming through on the tech savvy and digital native piece though, which is really, really interesting. I'm wondering if it's because it is such an inherent skill that we maybe almost don't recognize it as something that is valuable. But we can definitely maybe pull that out in some of the Q&A towards the end. Okay, I will quickly summarise in a bit of a whistle-stop tour before we jump into questions some of our key learnings. So I'll do this as quickly as I can if we move on to this one. Yeah, great, thanks Alison. So yeah, embracing that technology. Take their suggestions on board if they've got a different way of doing something or a new tool or software. Absolutely, take their feedback on board, embrace that. But equally, if they prefer pen and paper, embrace that as well. That regular constructive feedback, but with really positive corrective action, does take time, but we do see from our own experience that you see quite a quick return on investment. So definitely worth considering. Purpose is actually quite a simple one. It's just to remind them and show them that any work that they're doing, how that actually aligns to the wider organisational strategy. Do not underestimate how far that goes in building their engagement and making them really feel like they are adding value. It really builds their confidence. So it's a simple thing to do. It might be obvious to you how that piece of work is adding value, but it might not be clear to them. We've talked about flexibility and autonomy. They thrive on taking ownership and feeling trusted. I'm going to say this is definitely not just a Gen Z thing. I think we all felt that way at that age. We wanted to be feeling trusted and taking responsibility. So that definitely feeds into that clear goal setting and making sure that once you've got those parameters in place, it's easier and safer to extend that flexibility. Bring them together. If you've got young people across the business, please definitely explore how you can build a bit of a community around that if it doesn't already exist. They learn so much from one another. Inclusion and authenticity. You will have, I assume, probably lots of different opportunities in your organisation, employee networks, maybe volunteering days, that sort of thing. Those actually play such a key role in developing some of those social and emotional skills that we talked about earlier. So use those as development tools as well for any of the young people in your teams. Mentorship and development opportunities, as I discussed before, using those aspirational role models. So perhaps people who are only a few years older than the youngest people in your team. You don't always need to rely on the senior team members to play those mentoring roles. And finally, my really practical takeaway, hopefully, for all of you is don't do it alone. On the slide here, you can see some of the industry bodies and organisations that we've engaged and we've leveraged for our early talent. I definitely suggest following them on LinkedIn so you can see what events and activities are coming up that might be useful for people in your team. A lot of them are free as well, so definitely worth exploring. The ABI have started running a lot of young professionals events, a lot in London, but they are branching out regionally as well. The London Market Group runs some really cool summer festivals and things like that I'm pretty sure are free. And then Empower Development is another one that we've used, and they also run free events, I believe, for young people in the first couple of years of their careers. So that's just a handful of the ones that we've used. If you get on LinkedIn, start following the right organisations, you'll start filling your feed with some of this stuff. And it's really, really useful. You don't need to generate all these developmental experiences yourself. you can definitely make use of some of the great work that's being done across the market, because as I said at the beginning, it is quite an active conversation now. People are sitting up and deciding that, yeah, it's definitely the time that we need to start engaging this next generation and showing them how exciting our industry is. So that's my whistle-stop tour of different tips and techniques for engaging with this group. We've got a little bit of a summary of our key takeaways, I think, next. So obviously Heather covered at the beginning the piece around automation, data and AI, but actually the fact that those human-centric skills, those soft skills are still the kind of underpinning piece for success in all businesses. So it's definitely something to prioritise in your current workforce and even more so in the next generation coming through as well. Consider what are the most critical skills for the future and how you see AI and automation changing the type of work that you do. Start having those conversations. They can be quite confronting, but actually they're really important conversations to be having. Again, you can see skills like empathy, relationship building, adaptability are really central to leadership. Investing our time in these will really help us to be quite competitive as well and really drive that innovation across the business. We've spoken about them at length, Gen Z today, but they do have so much value to add in so many ways. And to be honest, I probably just scratched the surface, sharing some of our kind of more recent experiences, and I'm sure that you will have other things to share, but it's definitely time, I think, to start shifting the perceptions of this generation coming through. Absolutely, there are challenges and it's quite easy to brand them all with the same brush, but actually just really investigating them as individuals and understanding what their motivations are can go a long way in extracting a lot of value from them. And finally, be curious in everything you see and hear. It's not just be curious for me, it's really interrogate the stuff that you're seeing, especially on LinkedIn. The irony is that we've spoken a bit about social media and how it influences the next generation, but I think there's a lot of content out there as well that's influencing us and our perceptions of the next generation and the next workforce coming through. And we probably just need to be quite critical of some of the content we see and really think carefully about how it relates to us. And whether it matches or doesn't the experiences that we've had. So there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to take from the research and conversation out there, but just make sure that you are sure of how it would apply to you. So I think that is everything. We've got our learning objectives to recap, but that's your opportunity to scan through them. And if there's anything that we haven't covered that you would like us to, this is your opportunity. And I think I'm handing back to James to field questions.
I believe you are, if there were some questions, but well done. That was very interesting. So thank you very much. Oh, is that a question that's just come up?
Yeah.
Mel, yeah. Do you find when integrating Gen Z into a workforce with older generations that are a lot old, there are a lot of cohesion issues, or do you think that older gens are more open to learning from younger colleagues, especially from a tech perspective?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we've discovered recently is that the older generation and the more experienced colleagues in our workforce are really keen to pass on their knowledge and experience. And when we talk about that retirement cliff edge, that's something that's really, really important. So yeah, we've had a lot of requests for them to engage with our early careers cohorts, which is really, really nice. I think one of the main things you need to think about is the communication channels, definitely. I know I'm kind of heavily generalizing here, but it is something you need to think about how you're going to make that work if you are connecting both generations and also helping them both to understand each other's approaches. So obviously I did reference some of our interns who were a little bit more instant messenger heavy in terms of their communications and just helping them understand that actually there might be a better approach when working with someone of a different generation. But yeah, Heather, any other thoughts on that one?
I think you've covered it. I think the one bit I would add is the energy. I think what people in our business really love is the energy bringing younger people into the workforce has. So I think there's this kind of vibe of, oh, we've got the school kids in today. If we're doing something with our sixth form students, you know, the interns are here, and you see the younger generation that they'll just engage in conversations, and actually, you know, there's this view about, well, they're more socially awkward. Well, actually, that's not what we're seeing, as Morven said. So I think it's that energy and excitement that people have when they see younger people definitely within AXA in our workplace. And I think Morven's point about knowledge is really important. The one thing we need to get better at is, how do we deploy that knowledge? So actually, we've got somebody that we know is going to retire. They're really keen to share their knowledge and their pearls of wisdom, but actually, we probably need a bit of a process to capture that, to really make sure that we can get that knowledge out of their head and really share the critical bits before those people go off and go off into the sunset. So I think it's, you know, we probably need a bit more of a system around that.
Yeah.
I've just picked up another question there. Sorry, James, I'm just conscious of time as well. I think, not off the top of our head in terms of London market training providers, but we can certainly send something across to MGAA to share with the group. Within AXA Excel, one of our sister companies, they use a lot of training providers within the London market. So what we'll do is we'll reach out to them and just share with you after this, if that's okay. Sorry, James, I'll hand back to you now because you're a question master.
No, I don't know about that. So a couple of questions. So thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Mel, for your questions. So there's a question here from Chris. What tools and practices do you find work when managing a workforce working from home/hybrid? How do you avoid micromanaging so many people but not giving them too much flexibility?
Wow. Shall I go first, Morven? That's the $1 million question, isn't it? So I think we use Teams a lot. So actually, you know, a lot of our meetings are on Teams. So actually, setting those meetings up at regular times is quite helpful for people, but also allowing people the space to have a walk-in meeting or something like that, so they don't feel like they're staring at the screen for the whole day, which is very often what a lot of us do when working from home. So I think having that opportunity to mix it up a little bit, but also to set things quite regularly so people know what to expect and when, and they can schedule their days appropriately. It's great working from home because you can put a load of washing on, you can walk the dog in your lunch break, you can do all of these things that really help to take the pressure off everyday life. But I think generally you'll tend to sit there most days and do back-to-back meetings and calls. So actually having the ability to mix it up is quite helpful, and hopefully will get people more engaged rather than less engaged. So I'd say that would be probably top tip on that one, but I don't know if you want to add anything more, Vern.
Yeah, I think I've got so much to say on this one, I suppose, from an early careers point of view, but I'll try and keep it succinct. One of the things that we're finding is that, and I'm not sure, Chris, if you're talking about multi-gens or specifically the next gen coming through, but the next gen coming through, what we're finding is actually they really want to be in the office. Like they want to be in the working environment. I don't think that's unique to AXA. I think that is something that other organisations are experiencing. So that's the first thing. But actually, I really believe in freedom within a framework. So I think taking a step back and thinking about the experience of the group of individuals that you're working with and what you want their working week or month to look like, and building that framework. So showcasing to them, make sure you've got blended experiences in there. So whether it's group meetings, some in-person meetings, having a plan in place, but also planning in the flexibility points as well. Is kind of my approach, especially with the next generation. So I can show them from the outset what the next 3 months will look like. I want them to be on the same page as me, and show them that I've given it some real thought. So yeah, that flexibility within a framework is one of my favourite phrases. And then James, we've got another question, I think, have we?
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, but I'm also conscious want to answer this if we can. So are we seeing trends around how younger generations want to network and socialise? And is the market adapting here? For example, younger generations not into drinking culture, etc.
Yeah, this has been a really big discussion point for us here at AXA, and definitely in terms of the socialising piece. They do want in-person socialising, absolutely. And again, they want that to be in quite a structured environment. But what we find is that certainly outside of the London market, that socialising post-work with drinks is not doesn't go down as well. They quite like to work socialize within the working hours. They like it to have a bit of structure. They also like something that's got a bit of interactive learning as well, that gives them the opportunity to connect with multiple people in a structured way. So again, it goes back to possibly kind of their educational experiences. They have that expectation that there will be a bit of a structure to their networking experience and their socializing experience, not just a here's a room, here's some drinks, off you go. You do need to put a bit more effort in to sort of guide them through that process. So yeah, really good question and a big topic of conversation at the moment.
Marvin, Heather, thank you very much, and thank you for all the great questions we've had. I think I'm probably getting daggers from Alison right about now, so Alison, apologies, we've overrun a little bit.
No, that's absolutely fine, because it looks like some people have had to disappear off for those back-to-back meetings, but you've I say entertained. It's a serious topic. You've not been entertaining. You have informed. You have informed the audience, and the majority are still here, so they're not here to listen to me. So I will just, massive thank you to all three of you, and thank you for the time putting it together. Thank you for sharing it all with us, and thank you for everyone who joined us today, and for your questions and participation. I'm sure Morgan is very happy that you all played along with Slido.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And so yeah, we'll get editing the recording, and I will look to share that with you early next week. So yes, thank you to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.